Why? I missed you guys. I'm so sorry. It's been a minute since I've done any reviews and I just was not feeling well. I was feeling under the weather. Look, I actually considered not doing this review, but this is too important. We've been waiting for this series for so long, so I felt like I had to. So if my energy is a little bit low in this review, maybe not my usual energy, I don't know, just forgive me in advance. It's just adulting. Life be kicking my ass. The other day I cried for 1 hour and then the very next day I danced for 2 hours. I can be very mercurial like that, and I was just having one of those like slumps, but I think I'm back. I think I'm fine now. Welcome to the review of Aníkúlápó, Rise of the Spectre. This is a 6-part series streaming on Netflix, a sequel to the 2022 movie by the same title. Aníkúlápó is an epic drama and each episode is a little over an hour long. This series is a Kunleafolayan production and I think this is his first series, if I'm not mistaken. He also doubles as the writer-director, and the second writer is Sola, Dada. This series stars Kunle Remi, Bimbo Ademoye, Owobo Ogunde, whom now we all know is Herbert Ogunde's son, Sola Sobowale, Gabrielafolayan, Lateef Adejimeji, Eyiyemi, Afolayan, Usman, Uzi, and so many others. It's a general overview. The movie ended rather abruptly and uneventfully with Saro mobbed to death, so that set the scene for this sequel, which we're getting into now. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than my usual reviews. This is more a review recap because, you know, it's long. It's six parts. So we're trying to condense all of that into this. You know, I'll do sort of like a walkthrough episode by episode, and then we'll wrap up with talking about what worked, what didn't work, our usual format. Also, guys, there's something I'm trying to introduce. I know that my reviews tend to run long, so I'm starting something where I have this full in-depth review, and then I'm going to have a smaller, condensed, under 5-minute version of every review. Well, let's hope I can actually follow through on that, but that's my plan going forward. So even for this, I am going to have a smaller, condensed version of this review, but please, since you're here, stay here with me with this one. Now, as far as expectations coming into this, I was eager to see how the story would progress with more time and more room given for plot to develop. So that's what we're going to discuss here, how exactly that time and the extended space and scope were utilized. Guys, you're here. Thank you. I appreciate you. Please don't forget to like this video. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe, and at the end of this, please share. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. I really like to hear your thoughts. I know sometimes I argue with you, but it's all in the interest of understanding each other. It's never disrespectful. It's never to invalidate your opinion. Thank you. Also, before I forget, there's a GoFundMe I've been putting in all my videos so far. Because this one is going to run a bit long, let me not use up the time for that, but please, the link is in the description. Is to help my friend Jason get his kidney. Okay, he needs a kidney transplant, so please hit the button below. Help me share that, help me contribute whatever you can if you can. Thank you. Let's get into it. How do you say Jekalon? Jekalon is let's go, right? All right, summary / episodic walkthrough. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible, but guys, there's going to be big spoilers. Okay, so if you haven't watched this, I know sometimes you come here for like recommendations, see should I watch it or should I not waste my time. I'm going to put what they call them, timestamps in the description, so maybe you can just go straight to the what worked, what did not work section. But I just want to tell you that there's spoilers splattered throughout this review. I'm not going to be able to protect you from that, so it's your choice beyond this point. All right, episode 1 is titled The Messenger of Death, and it picks up where the movie left off. Kunle Remi reprises his role here as Saro, and he's in a procession to the afterlife, but he gets to the gate of, according to the subtitle, heaven, but he can't cross because, you know, all the shenanigans in the, if you haven't watched the movie, it'll be nice to watch the movie because this is a direct continuation of the movie, so you really have to know all the events that happen there for anything that happens here to really make sense. All right, so Saro gets here to Heaven's Gate and he finds out that he's not allowed to cross over into the great beyond because he has to go back and kill the people whose deaths he had prevented in the movie. Now, I wish that they had leaned into the mythology and explained why he had to go on this mission, right? You guys have probably probably heard that Chinese concept. I'm very sure it's a Hollywood made up, just this concept, this Chinese principle or whatever, that if you save someone's life, you're forever responsible for them. So if they're hungry, if they're homeless, you're responsible for them. If they murder someone, you're responsible for them. So anyway, I guess I'm just saying that little anecdotes like this are what makes stories memorable and actually make them meatier and feel more grounded. But to just say go back and kill the people, it's kind of floating there. It doesn't make for memorable storytelling, if you know what I mean. Anyway, they're told that if he does not do that, if he doesn't do this, he'll end up like one of the lost souls that we saw there, the disobedient ones as they're called. I'm telling you, this man cannot catch a break. How many times did he die in the movie? And now again, they're not going to just let this man die in peace. So anyway, he's turned back. So far, I would say this is interesting conflict, pretty much asking him to hit Control Z and undo. Okay. And also at this point, he discovers that he's invisible. He's pretty much moving through the world as a ghost. Now we can debate whether or not this is better for stakes for the movie, but as far as difficulty for his mission, this makes it incredibly easier for him to accomplish his mission. So that made it a bit less interesting than if he was visible. But never mind that. Also, he wasn't exactly given a time frame, and I think that this was a weakness in story. It's always important to set a ticking clock. Now he starts on this mission. He succeeds with the first 3, but the 4th victim offers him a way to return to life by way of the living rate, so he doesn't have to continue with this mission of killing 20 people. So Saro performs the required sacrifice and he comes back to life and he becomes visible again. But then before this man can even start to relax to enjoy his new lease on life, he finds himself accosted by these 3 shadow people who call themselves his dependents. So apparently they're the 3 people that he has just killed again. So they cannot proceed into the afterlife. He has to guide them. So now they're stuck on him like glue, following him all around like 5 p.m. shadow. He's like, please, I'd like to be here a little longer. And they're like, okay, you have 3 years. I would say that was a very generous amount of time. Why 3 years? That was so arbitrary, but also such a long time. You know what I mean? For people who are dead and are eager to go into the afterlife, in my opinion, 3 weeks is too much. Anyway, they give him sustenance, they give him food, whatever it is. They set him up in business. I have no idea why all of this is happening. And also, my question here was, why does he not feel scammed, by the woman who, she promised him that he would leave. She didn't tell him that something like this could happen, and he would inevitably still die. So it feels like she didn't hold up her end of the bargain, but that was not followed through. That's fine. Now we have Arolake. We also remember her. She's also making her way back to Oyo with a great deal of difficulty. Or well, not to Oyo, but maybe in that direction, because that's where she ends up, very close to the Oyo kingdom. So I'll just say she's making her way in that general direction. So that's kind of where we wrap up episode 1. So what are my thoughts about this first episode? I'm not going to do this in depth for the rest of the episodes, but because this is the pilot, I went a bit more detailed. So I'm going to say that this was a really great pilot. I liked this as a pilot. I thought it was a great setup for the conflict of the series. If this was going to be the conflict of the series going forward, I thought that this was great. I thought it was good. The world looked really good and bigger and whatever. I thought that, establishing who we think our protagonists are and what we think their journey for the series was going to be, I thought that this was all well done. Now, retrospectively, do I think that this was a good pilot? No. But just as a pilot in itself, standalone, watching it, I thought it was great until when I saw later that all the events that happened did not really have all that much to do with the establishment. And I'm like, why? Anyway, moving on. Episode 2, titled Dead or Alive. This it starts right off delving into kingdom politics, the beginnings of Bashorun's ambitions. There was a boring stretch that I had no idea what was happening. Then, we have the Kabiesi here in council, and this is at this point in episode 2, they find out that Saro's still alive, and Bashorun makes finding Arolake and Saro his business. It's also in this episode that Arolake meets Akin, who will be her husband. Also in this episode, she has an episode where she wanders into the magical forest. She meets all these magical creatures. We have a dwarf, we have a half man, half plant, we have this Siamese twin, we have this 3-breasted woman, because why not? And they give her gifts, magical gifts, and the most important of which is this pouch of unending supply of money. So we know that she's set up. In this episode, we only kind of see Saro in flashback with which was not great for who we're thinking is one of our main protagonists. The episode was boring for the most of it, like more than maybe 2/3 of this episode I would say was pretty boring. There were these interminable council scenes that I didn't care that much about. And the problem is that when people are talking on and on and on and droning, even if critical information is passed, it's lost because it's too much. So that's my opinion. I really could have quit watching in episode 2. We go to episode 3. This is titled Pouch of Wealth. These titles are ass. Anyway, this is mostly Arolake's story. She settles in with Akin's family, and then she discovers what these gifts that she had gotten was, what it can do, and all of a sudden she's Otedola pretty much, So I love the slow development of the love story between Arolake and Akin. I love this bottomless money sequence, like when she discovers, she keeps taking out the money and seeing that it's not, please, where can I find it? Where I was going to say I'll give a kidney, but my friend needs a kidney right now, so that's not the best joke or whatever, analogy, whatever. Anyway, all I could think in that moment was she deserves it after everything that she's been through. But as far as the magic and, all the questions about why they gave her these gifts and how about the other gifts, what do they do? Because we did not see, magical gifts are so specific that they are not superfluous. So for her to have been given all the things that she was given, but throughout the series, the only one we saw executed was the money pouch. I don't know, but never mind, that's a different matter entirely. Anyway, she starts living the baby girl life with Akin as her ride or die. Okay, he becomes her ride or die. On the other side, we have Saro also enjoying a spell of incredible good fortune. These his dependents, they're taking care of him, they're setting him up in business. He now has palm wine that comes from nowhere. In the morning, he just has palm wine there to sell, and so he opens his business. Everyone is coming here. There's some things that just don't make sense. For instance, like, how is no one questioning Arolake and Sola Saro's good fortune? As a palm wine tapper, if you've lived anywhere like in a village community, everybody knows where the palm wine, no matter how deep in the forest you're going, there are people that see you, they greet you, they pass by, people going to farm in the morning as you're going to. Nobody sees Saro doing any of this. How come nobody's asking where is he doing, especially since his palm wine is so superior? There's no way that even his direct competitor, the town's palm wine tapper, whose business he stole, and then he now stole his daughter for good measure because why not? Jara, Fisi. Even he is not tracking him and trying to figure out, I want to know where he's getting this, his superior, what trees he's, you know what I mean, what area. So they dropped the ball there. Anyway, on the other side, wherever she is, Arolake is out there creating inflation. She becomes, from being a Gary apprentice to, just like I said, Otedola. She has this incredible wealth that seems to come out of nowhere. Why is no one asking questions? Even the town's leadership, at most, if you have that kind of money where people are lining up in front of your house to ask for loans, they will invite you to come and join the council. You know what I mean? So that was a big fail, but it's okay. Also, the question that keeps plaguing me throughout is, why would these people not change their names? After all the stuff that has happened, and this was still my question in the movie, Saro remains Saro. Like, why? And because that leads me to another critical thing that's happening in this episode, which is that the search for Saro and Arolake intensifies. And we move on to episode 4. It's titled Important Guest. Again, ass. These titles, very uninspired. Anyway, in this episode, we find out that Saro's wife, that's the palm wine tapper's daughter, Latorera, her mom is Awarun. I hope that's her name. Shola Shobowale's character. I'm going to be saying Awarun. So if that's not her name, forgive me. So Saro's wife, Latorera, we find out that Shola Shobowale's character, Awarun, is her mom. That was a great moment, and it was the greatest twist of surprise or whatever of the entire series. However, not much was done with that detail beyond how it impacted on Bashorun's goal of finding Saro. So not very much was made of that. There's a bit of contrived drama in this episode about the king needing to replace Arolake. Arolake has been gone for years at this point, several years at this point. So why is it now all of a sudden that the king needs to replace her and they have that whole pageant? It was good for giggles, but it wasn't impactful for story. Arolake, in this episode, she decides they've been hunting for her. She's tired of hiding. So she comes to the palace and Saro is also taken hostage. Well, when I say she comes to the palace, she begins paying these surreptitious visits to the Kabiyesi and basically rendezvousing with the king. And so disgracefully, after everything Arolake has been through, she becomes even less than a concubine. She becomes the king's secret lover, hoping that he would reinstate her publicly, bring her back. All I can say is, Arolake! Why?
Maybe you are worthless.
Let me just compress episodes 5 and 6. They're titled Noisy Night and Unraveling, respectively. I like unraveling. Well, Saro is forced back to Oyo, and he's also forced to, by Bashorun, and he's forced to perform his magic of raising the dead. Now, in this episode, there's a love triangle between Afolayan, that's Bashorun's son, the prince of Ede Kingdom, Kuranga, and the Kabiesi's daughter. I'm sorry, princess, somebody, I can't remember her name. Bashorun, of course, he has been looking for Saro, and he finds out that this girl here, Latorera, Aworan's daughter, is Saro's wife, and he tries to get that out of her. Aworan refuses to give up her daughter to Bashorun, and I'm telling you guys, that was the most beautiful scene of the entire series, in my opinion. The way Aworan stood up to Bashorun, I loved it. It was epic. Arolake is captured, and Bashorun decides to execute her. Remember, I'm merging episodes 5 and 6, so okay, moving on. The princess marries Kuranga, but he dies, I suppose, after consummating his marriage with her. Saro, with the help of his dependents, is able to raise him from the dead, as Bashorun forces him to do, but in Kuranga's shadow state, so he's pretty much dead walking, right? He dies, he makes his way all the way back to the Ede Kingdom, whereupon he dies on arrival, and then his kinsmen arrive Oyo, capture the princess in broad daylight because our wife, and her father is just standing there like this because he has been a weak king throughout, and they kill Bashorun. Yeah. Arolake is also saved in the nick of time, and as for Saro, I'm not sure. At the end of this, the only thing that has really changed fundamentally is that the main villain of the story or the season so far, Bashorun, has been taken out of the story. He's dead, very visually, very visibly so. Too bad. The kingdom still has a weak, ineffectual king. Arolake has her money bag and her husband back. Again, not sure about Saro, whatever happened to him. His dependents, I think they give up on him, so they try to make their way to the afterlife without him. I'm not sure if they succeeded or not. Guys, I'm not gonna lie to you. At this point, I was just trying to make it to the end of this series. I was exhausted. I watched it in one stretch. And unlike movies where I'm able to watch 2 or 3 times before I do a review, I don't have that luxury with series. I couldn't. Okay, what worked? Let's get straight to it. I'm going to try to barrel through this section as quickly as I can. The scale and the world building expanded, to introduce the Ede Kingdom, and I think all of this was just incredible, as expected, because one thing that Kunleafolayan knows how to do is world building, so this was just incredible. The scale was larger, and I think it's going to continue to expand in this way, introducing more and more worlds into our main story, our main kingdom. Production value and design, another thing you can come to expect with Kunleafolayan production, really also very, very good, incredible, just great sound. I loved the theme music, I loved the incantations, great locations, great sets, mostly good makeup, hair and costume, Hakim effect, I see you. For the cinematography, it was really good staging, good blocking, and also some really epic shots, but that's not a complete picture of cinematography, and I will have something to say about that later. The performances, there's some really amazing performances, especially Owobo Ogunde as the villain of the series or the season. He was incredible, and I hear that he's a first-time actor. I cannot believe it. He was amazing. He was so believable and he had that permanent smile that made him even scarier. So I want to see him in more things because he was incredible. I just loved him in this role. Shola Sobowale, she's wonderful. We know what to expect from her. So once again, she proved herself to be an amazing actress, and where required, her performances were electrifying, like in the scene I had already highlighted. Kunle Remi was amazing in this, very expressive. He did a lot of face acting in this, as was Bimbo Ademoye. Now, what I'm going to say for our 2 main protagonists is that they could only do what the story allowed them. A bit more on that later. Afolayan, I understand that's Kunleafolayan's daughter. She's beautiful. She really carried off this this role as, this fragile princess, and then eventually torn between like these two men. She's off to a great start. As a general note on acting and performances, I will say that the performances were only as good as the material that the actors were given to work with, which for the most part, with the exception of Owobo, that's Bashorun, wasn't much. So that's that, the story. Like I've already said, the pilot, great setup, very fascinating and clear conflict at first. I appreciate the twists and turns of plot and all the surprises, again, especially in the beginning, the way the stakes kept heightening for Saro, do this, oh no, you do this, no, oh, you have to do this. And I thought that I was like, can they sustain this throughout the series, because this would be so interesting. So all of this in the beginning, right? Amazing cultural immersion, loved it. Everything just looked so good. The world, the people, the dressing, I've said all of that, but all of it came together to just make us feel very immersed in this world. There were some really good cliffhangers. The best was episode 5. If you watched it, you probably know that scream in the middle of the night. Good relationship sketches between some of our characters. Example, Arolake and Akin, their relationship, I loved it. And also the relationship between Awuran and her daughter. I thought that those were really good sketches. Whew. That's the end of what worked. I'm always surprised when I get there and I'm like, oh, was that all? But I'm like, oh, I think I got most of it. It's not always exhaustive, obviously, just as also the list of what did not work is also not exhaustive, but let's go. Story, plot, pacing, and character storylines. Let's start with the magic. The magic in this series was inconsistent. We had Saro passing through people, which means he could pass through objects or whatever it is. But then when he was going to kill somebody, he was lifting the mats that blocked the door as though he couldn't have just, spirited his way through. I didn't understand why Arolake, I think I've said this before, was given those gifts and what all the other gifts were and if there were any conditions attached. One thing that spirit beings will not do is just give you gifts for no reason. With everything I'm saying here, I want us to remember that this is one season, so some things might end up being Easter eggs and they are picked up in the next series. So let me just say that as sort of a caveat to all of this, right? Now, what was the implication? I don't know what the implication of Saro truncating his mission was, because apart from the 3 dependents that popped up, nothing really happened beyond. He just went on to live his life fully, until this man started looking for him up and down the place. So I have no idea what the implication of him truncating his mission was. Now, the Akala bird was missing that gourd, the Aníkúlápó. What was the implication of that? What did it mean in the magical ecosystem? That's because it has to have been important, right? And then the other magical creatures, did they not know that Arolake had committed sort of like this grievous error and was therefore persona non grata in the magical world? So them just giving her gifts is something that kind of bugged me a little bit. I don't know if there were no consequences for the other souls that were left alive. I think that goes hand in hand with asking what was the penalty for Saro truncating his mission. I didn't like the jump in the relationship between Saro and Latorera. It just kind of happened very abruptly. That's the same thing that happened in the movie with Arolake, and I think this is something that is kind of like a theme you see across Kunleafolayan's movies. The same thing happened in Ijogbon with the love story there. Then there were a lot of filler scenes in this series. As those interminable council meetings, they killed me. These men talking with every word like said with so much emphasis and slow and all of that. Honestly, I could have cut most of those things out. I didn't care about the war. I had no bearing on the prominent and emotional storylines. It just felt like a different storyline happening independent of the main movie. What was even the main storyline? I don't know. Protagonists were mostly passive. The most active that any of our protagonists was when Arolake, tired of running, decided to go back to the king. Whether or not it was a smart decision is another matter entirely. Now, it's important for movies to have obligatory scenes that the series or the movie or whatever is building towards. We had those, right? But they were not handled as such. They weren't handled like obligatory scenes. And so when they happened, it was kind of anticlimactic. Let me give you 2 examples. One was Arolake's return to the palace, and then the other was Arolake meeting again with Saro. So these were all obligatory scenes that were like, let's see what happens when this happens, but it happened in ways that were just pretty underwhelming. The wrestling and that whole storyline was a waste of time and a waste of Adedimeji Lateef. This is an incredible actor. I did not like him in this series at all. The stories of hardship, death, all the reported evidence of Alaka's, is it Akala or Alaka? Akala? I don't know, Alaka's, the bird. It's rough. They were all reported, you know, and they were all tell, not show. So it didn't feel connected to the main story because we didn't see any of these things happening. We're just hearing, oh, people are dying, the farms are, whatever it is, river is drying, I don't know. So it didn't feel important or connected to the main story. I couldn't root for the love story. Basharun's son, Awolaran, he was ambitionless. All day, all night, he's playing Ayo. Even the whistling he was doing, it looked more like a hobby than like a career, even if he was incredibly gifted at it. So there was nothing about him that made me want to see him with the king's daughter, if you know what I mean. And also the age difference between them made the whole story of them being childhood friends kind of implausible. I hate that Arolake ended up back in that demeaning position of being used essentially for sex, because that was the thing that she kind of carried with her in the movie, where she was mocked as the king just wants to sleep with you, that's all you're good for. But here now she brings herself and puts herself in this position. But let me say though that I'm glad that she now has a good man that loves her, and also I'm eager to see how her story develops from here. This is only season 1, it's only the beginning of her story, so I'm eager to see what happens. I hope though that going forward they remember to keep her aging consistent. That aging back and forth that they did in the movie ended up with a jump where she was incredibly aged, Saro did not age a day, and then when we come back here she's young again, and I'm like, anyway, so time and distance were not established consistently across the series. I don't think that enough was done with Basharun's subplot, and his death was underwhelming for such an important character, and so it did not feel cathartic. It didn't give what I thought it would give when he eventually died. That's as far as story. Production design. Some VFX was not great. There was a lot of visual effects in this movie. I do appreciate the attempt, and in some instances, you know, it came close. I loved those magical creatures. That was more makeup than anything else, but just there were some things that were seriously funny, like that head that was cut off. That snake was hilarious. Those beings that were supposed to first it was Saro and then later his dependent. There was a way they had this glow that was supposed to be like from within, sort of like giving them a translucent otherworldly quality. All I saw was I literally could see production lights like flashing from the sidelines. It just looked like light was being put on them, not what I know was being attempted. The blood spatter, and also when we had rain, they did not look realistic. Hakim makeup, like I said, he was really busy on this set. It was wonderful. There was just so much of it, and I saw that a lot of work was done, but not all of it was good. Arolake had that underarm hair that looked like it was glued on. Those dreadlocks on Angel Gabriel, whatever his name was, Odunsi's character at Heaven's Gate, it was atrocious. The stone figures that we saw, they looked like they were cast in newly smelted bronze, not stone. And then those dead people in the procession, they looked like they just had white dusting powder slapped on their faces. I don't know. Like, more care could have been taken with some of these things, you know, just to give a picture of excellence. We're still in that stage of they really tried. We can go, especially for someone of Kunleafolayan's stature, I think we can go past they really tried, you know. There were some, yes, I said I would have something to say about cinematography. It was competent enough. There were great shots, like I said, good framing and staging, etc. But cinematography is beyond that. It's to how it's used effectively to also contribute in elevating storytelling, and I can't say that I saw that. As far as the dialogue and dialogue delivery, this series was dialogue heavy. I know I've already said that, but it can stand to be repeated. It was dialogue heavy, and the problem with that is sometimes very critical things are said, but when the dialogue goes on and on, these droning voices talking endlessly, you tune out, you zone out, or you forward, and then critical information is lost in the miasma. I hope that's the word. Sometimes I make up words or borrow words and use them wrongly, but lost. And also the way they deliver the dialogue, they pick a lot of times, they're picking words, pick. Like, I'm like, I had to actually pause and say some words in my language to see, like, is it a language thing? I'm like, no, it's not. We are fluent in our language. You know, we don't all talk one. And because we had so many of those council meetings where they all have to speak with so much emphasis and moment and all of that, I was like, God, this is endless. Didn't love that. The sound, I've already said that the sound was good for the most part. However, there are times when the talking drum becomes too much and it starts to feel claustrophobic and unsettling, and I really had that feeling in this series. That's all for things that did not work for me, but let me just add this part, which is the confusing. Whether or not it makes it into the video will be determined by the length of this video by the time I'm done. So let's see. It's more like questions. Why would Bashorun have Saro wake Kuranga when Kuranga was like the main person that stood in the way of his ambitions for his son and the princess? It's not like he knew that Kuranga would die again later. So why, of all the people that he could have, in fact, Bashorun is the kind of person that could just randomly kill somebody if he was looking for a specimen. So also, why would he let Saro go? That was not very much in keeping with his character. What was the amulet for? The amulet that Saro was given, it never came into play in this series. Again, could be Easter eggs, I don't know, but we didn't see it do anything. What happened to the ritual that Saro's wife, Laturera, was supposed to perform when we heard much talk about it with her mother, but nothing came of that. With Saro, some of the things that he did, there was no interiority. There was no interiority for a lot of our characters. Even when they had people that they could talk to, share thoughts with. For instance, I would have liked to know why Arolake was doing what she was doing with the king, what she hoped to achieve, considering that her husband was her accomplice, but eventually he was not happy with how things turned out. So I would have liked to see what that conversation was when he was running all the errands for her before things happened in a way that he did not like. So there were just things that confused me. Why were Saro's descendants in procession with Bashorun? You know, like, could you just switch that way? I have no idea. What happened to Saro? I don't know. Speaking of Saro, the closing image of Saro's women, it was good for barroom chatter, internet chatter, giggles, you know, all of Saro's women together. He's okay, that was nice, but not great for story, because Saro ultimately did not matter enough in this series for that to be the closing image. I don't care about him in this series. I don't. That said, that trio, that triumvirate of those women, it could be important in subsequent seasons to see how their combined strength with the directive of Awuran's power, her political savviness, her business, is it savviness? I don't know if that's a word. Her business savvy and Arolake's wealth. It would be nice to see what those three women together can achieve in the coming seasons. By the way, that baby had a very nice haircut. When I saw the baby's hair, I was like, whoa, that does not look like it was scraped with shells. In conclusion, this series was too chaotic. It was too chaotic. There were too many story threads and subplots and not enough justice done to any. With these, maybe with the exception of Bashorun, but even then, like I said, his ending was very unsatisfying. With these epic dramas, you start to get the sense that it's like the audience for them is assumed, and so there's a different energy when you're trying to court an audience versus when you can assume the audience, and so you pretty much just put whatever out there. That's the sense I get with this, like a lack of care. They all have, you know, all these epic dramas again, they're starting to have like a certain similarity. They are bleeding into each other, even to the extent that when Kuranga came back from the dead for that short period, he had the same like twitch, you know, that thing that Ogundiji was doing in Jagun. I was like, wow, maybe it means something. I don't know. The plot was all over the place. The pacing was not great. This story could have been a lot more interesting, and it could have stayed closer to the protagonist as the pilot had promised. The ending was vague and inconclusive, but not in a good way. I've said sometimes that it's good to leave some things unfinished, but not this ending, not in this way. I don't particularly recommend this series. It's not a bad viewing experience. It's just a bit uninteresting once the plot veered off track after the pilot, and it never quite recovered. There were just too many plot holes. It didn't have nearly enough depth. This series is enjoyable for the exoticity and color of culture and mythology, the visual elements, but not very much else. don't come to it for the story. Going into the second season, what do we think is the pressing question that we want resolved in this series? What is the cliffhanger? We don't know what happened to Saro, but the question is, do we care? Seeing how, diminished his role was here. Bashorun, who has been like the ultimate villain throughout this season, he's killed. So the second season has to start the journey of creating a new villain and a new conflict. Why? I hear there's going to be several more seasons. Is this what we can expect? Every season will create a new story, conflict, and then I don't know. So I say there's so many people that are like, oh, Game of Thrones. And I say to those intent on mentioning Game of Thrones alongside this series, we all know the main conflict of Game of Thrones, which is the Iron Throne. What is the conflict of this show? What is the main stake? If you can't answer that, then please don't be saying Game of Thrones here. I rate this series a 5.5. That's 5.5 out of 10. So, guys, thank you once again for being here. I was really looking forward to this series. I don't think that it's good for passing time, which is pretty much what I did. But was it an incredible viewing experience? Far from. Thank you again. Please don't forget to like, don't forget to share this with your friends, don't forget to subscribe. You have the right to an incredible viewing experience. I'm so exhausted. Say that again. You have the right to an incredible viewing experience, so never settle.